Welcome to the Optimistic Met Fan Podcast, the home for hope, heart, and a whole lot of orange and blue. Whether we're riding a hot streak, surviving a slump, or dreaming about what this team can be, I'm here to break it all down with positivity, perspective, and a true fan's love for the Mets. Just honest takes, big picture optimism that next year, or even this year, could be our year. Well, let's talk Mets. So, welcome to another episode, folks, as we embark on what could be a really good year for the New York Mets. So, in my first segment, I'm going to discuss the prospects that I think everybody should keep an eye on. In the second segment, I'm going to talk about the Mets lineup and where I think it could go. And then in the final segment, I'm going to talk about some free agents that are still available and a surprise trade that I think the Mets should definitely consider. But before all that, I just want to thank everybody for subscribing to the channel lately. I appreciate all the love that you guys have been giving me. And also a special shout out to the Diamond Geezers, who have a great podcast. I suggest you guys check it out. I was a guest on their show last week, and it was a lot of fun. I really appreciated it. And, So let's get started on today's episode. So like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the prospects that the Mets have that I think a lot of people don't know about yet. There are a few names that, aren't household names. So I thought that'd be a really fun segment to do. So first prospect I wanted to discuss was Mr. Jacob Reimer. He's a third baseman, a lot of power in Binghamton, AA. Really good prospect. This guy took off last year. Between A-ball and AA, just want to read off a couple of his stats here. In 122 games, he had 88 runs scored, 32 doubles, 5 triples, 17 home runs, 77 RBIs, 15 stolen bases, 56 walks, a really impressive 282 average with a 379 on base percentage and a 491 slug. And with that, he ended up with an 870 OPS. And, he finally figured out the offense of the professional level. This is a guy that was drafted in 2022 in the 4th round. And last year, and even going into this year, they're projecting him to be ranked in the top 10, somewhere around number 7. And this guy has a ton of upside. Went from A-ball to AA by the end of the season in 2025, had a breakout season. Scouts and analysts view him as a power hitter with a lot of good plate discipline, who, could be a middle of the order hitter when it's all said and done. He does need to get more consistent with the strike zone, even though he does have some good plate discipline at this level, at this stage of the game at 22. But, really finding his power. So, I kind of figure that's where the strikeouts came from, because they do say that he does have consistent contact in the minor leagues. He doesn't strike out a lot, has really good bat-to-ball skills. So what I'm looking forward to is seeing him continue this progression the way that he is. I think he's a great prospect. Kind of reminds me of a mix between Matt Chapman and J.D. Davis. Now, I know a lot of people are going to cringe when I say J.D. Davis, but I actually thought for the few years J.D. was on the team, he was a really good offensive player. And they're saying that the upside with Jacob Reimer, or the way he's going to get up to the majors, is with the bat. He does need to figure out the defensive side of the, of the game. but he's progressing. Little by little, he's getting better at third base. They've played him at some first base. They've even thrown him out in the outfield in the corners. So it's just a matter of time to figure out where he fits in. But as long as the bat plays, I can see him going through to the major league level probably by 2027. We could be talking about, could this guy be the next guy coming up? So it's very exciting. I love this kid. I think he's really good. And the great thing about the Mets farm system being ranked number one is even if he doesn't find a spot on this team, he's trade capital for July 31st. And I know it got extended, the trade deadline for the upcoming season. I think it's August 2nd or 3rd, something like that. I saw something online that said they were extending the trade deadline. So we'll see. Maybe he's a guy that gets traded for a really good piece. Maybe he's a guy that comes up and surprises people in a year or two. I think this kid has a lot of upside. I'm very excited about him. So keep your eyes on Jacob Reimer. The number 2 guy I wanted to talk about today is a young man who is turning heads right now in the Mets system. A guy who kind of came out of nowhere, I would say. Because I didn't even know about him until last year when they brought him up on a couple of broadcasts of SNY. A young man by the name of A.J. Ewing. He's an outfielder right now, playing mostly center field. So I know every Met fan should be excited about that. He's also in Binghamton Double A right now. So in 124 games last year, just read off some of his stats so you know what he did last year. 87 runs, 26 doubles, 10 triples, 3 home runs, 55 RBIs, and a incredible 70 stolen bases. This kid has wheels on him, folks. 68 walks, and I'm going to read off these numbers. A 315 batting average, a 401 slug, a 429 OP on base percentage, and an OPS of 830. That's awesome. And this kid is young. He's athletic. He has speed. He has great instincts. And, I'm excited about A.J. Ewing. He was the prospect that a lot of people wanted when we were trying to make trades earlier this offseason. He was one of the pieces that David Stearns didn't want to get rid of. So I'm very excited about that because this kid could be the next, dare I even say his name, Jose Reyes. And I'm not saying that to disrespect Jose Reyes. I'm saying it to just say that, this kid has those type of wheels on him. 70 stolen bases, in the minors last season, led the minor leagues with stolen bases. So that's really impressive. And he hasn't even touched his full potential yet. So he was also drafted in the 4th round as well, back in 2023, ranked 6th in the Mets system, projected, I believe. Last year, he was somewhere in the top 10 as well. So this kid is really good. The Mets really like him. They're going to keep pushing him forward. The scouts rave about his speed, like I said, and they say it's elite speed. They say he can be a 60 stolen base guy in the major league level. They expect him to be either a center fielder or somewhere in the infield. I think he is destined to be the Mets center fielder if it isn't Carson Bench. Carson Bench is probably going to be your left fielder of the future. So that really highlights why, I'll go back to the trade real quick with Luis Robert Jr. He's here for just 2 years if the Mets pick up his option. And they could always say, just have a one and done type of season with him if this kid, A.J. Ewing, skyrockets through Double A this season and gets promoted to Triple A. And then if he keeps going the way he's going, I can see A.J. Ewing also being a candidate to come up to the Mets in 2027 if everything goes well. a lot of injuries happen in the minor leagues. I know that the former top prospect of the Mets, Jet Williams, had a lot of injuries early on in his minor league career, so staying healthy is going to be the big thing for these guys. But again, you know, uh, Ewing has a combination of speed, contact, his versatility, like I said, playing the outfield and the infield. Really, really impressive. He does need improvement against off speed stuff. So that's something he's going to need to work on in the minors, even though he has good plate discipline and gets on base a lot. But that was at the lower levels. Now that he's going to be in the upper levels of the farm system, he's going to need to work on that a little bit. I have no doubt in my mind that he can, because he just has that aggressiveness that the scouts love. He seems to have a knack for getting on base. So as long as he does that, I could see him being a guy that could make the difference in the Mets lineup. And hopefully we see him soon. Hopefully he doesn't get traded. The next guy on my list is... Now this guy, I don't know if everybody knows him. He was a international free agent back in 2022. This young man is Chris Suaro. He is a catcher. That's his primary position. But he has played first base, and in the Winter League, they had him out in the outfield, the Mets. So he also made it up to Double-A by the end of the season. In 15 games, he had 78 runs, 16 doubles, 1 triple, 16 home runs, 68 RBIs, 35 stolen bases. For a catcher, that's pretty impressive. 70 walks, another guy who has a good eye at the plate. His average was a little low, 233, with a 379 on base percentage and a 407 slug for 789 86 OPS. Honestly, for a really young kid, that's not that bad. That's really impressive. What I like about Chris Suaro is, again, the defensive versatility of the prospects that I've been talking about today, especially Chris Suaro, is extremely important. It's something that for the last 2 or 3 years the Mets have implemented in how they try to run an organization, how they try to run their team, to have guys learn the game the right way, learn different defensive positions, because you never know when you're going to be called up to the major league level. And, I just think it's really, really exciting seeing this kid play. I saw a couple of highlights of winter ball, and the ball just flies right off this kid's bat. He did sign, like I said, as an international free agent back in 2022. His versatility on defense is what scouts love. And the fact that he can play catcher, first base, the outfield, he balances power and patience at the plate. I think that's also evident with the 16 home runs and the 70 walks. He does have a little bit of a lift in his swing that scouts are a little bit concerned with. Could lead to a lot of strikeouts and to be a pull hitter. I'm not too concerned about that yet because, like I said, he is very young. So we could probably teach him to not do that. If that's his natural swing, then I guess we're just going to have to live with that. But again, all these numbers seem really, really great. What's good about the lift in his swing is that he might be just one of these power hitters that, you're just going to have to live with some of the strikeouts when he gets to the higher levels. But he does blend power, speed, and good contact with the bat. So he does get on base with base hits. He's not just a home run hitter. But scouts are saying that he could turn into that if he doesn't figure out that swing. So, just something to say, to be honest. I know, you can hype up a lot of these prospects, but again, I think that with his flexibility to play different positions, I think Chris Suaro was one of those prospects that I'm really going to keep an eye on just to see, is he going to be a catcher? Is he going to be a first baseman? Is he destined for the outfield? I don't even think the Mets really know. because it's so early in his career, but it'll be really fun to see him. He does need a lot of work behind the plate, they say. But they said that about Alvarez also. So I don't really know if you could take that, you know, to heart or take it with a grain of salt. But again, another impressive young prospect. So keep an eye on Chris Suaro. He's going to be the number 15 prospect by the time the new list comes out this year. So very excited to see where he goes. The next prospect I wanted to talk about is a guy that is more known for his defense. And at the end of last year, he came into his offense. And that's a gentleman by the name of Boston Barrow. I just think his name is really cool, Boston Barrow. But he played mostly in Brooklyn last year, okay? And he should get promoted to Double A by the start of this year. So this whole year he was in the high A system in Brooklyn, New York, where you can see the Cyclones. So if anybody lives in New York, or lives in Brooklyn rather, you can go check him out before he gets promoted to Double A. I love Coney Island area. I think it's really getting up there with the popularity with the fans down in Brooklyn, the Cyclones. So in 103 games, this young man scored 43 runs, had 16 doubles, 5 triples, 4 home runs, 38 RBIs, 28 stolen bases. So he showed some speed with 31 walks, and you can tell he wasn't very much of an offensive player, like I said, with a 224 batting average, 282 on base percentage, with a 321 slug for a 602 OPS. Like I said, he's not known for his offense, but again, he's a very young kid. Was drafted back in 2023 with AJ Ewing. So AJ Ewing kind of sprung pretty fast. Boston Barrow's kind of still struggling a little bit to find his footing. Like I said, he found it at the end of this year. So I do like him as a utility guy if he does come up to the Mets, but he may struggle a little bit. I don't know if he's going to go all the way, but I still think he's an interesting prospect to talk about. He's known as a left-handed hitter with gap power and a good feel for the strike zone. So we'll see. Maybe he's just the guy that's going to put the ball in play and use his legs to get on base. Honestly, we need a guy to be the new Luis Angel Acuna. So maybe Boston Barrow could be that guy. Like I said, they project him, scouts, to be a utility player by the time he comes up here. So we'll see. He does have good instincts defensively, and defense wins games. So hopefully he does enough offensively to get drafted, because I would love to see this kid come up. I think he's going to be a really exciting young player. The last position player on my list that I wanted to talk about is a guy that we could be talking about for a long time. And the reason why I say that is he's a very young, impressive young man that the Mets were lucky enough to acquire. So he was acquired in a trade back in August 1st of 2023 in exchange for Tommy Pham. And that young player's name is Jeremy Rodriguez. Now, back then, when we drafted him, he was 16 years old. He is now 18, and he's a shortstop primarily, but he has played second base and third base. And in 112 games, he had 56 runs, 7 doubles, 2 triples, a home run, 40 RBIs, 34 stolen bases, 60 walks, a 202 batting average, so that's not that great, 304 on base percentage, a 236 slug, and a 540 OPS. Now, again, he is only 18, so I'm more impressed with the fact that he's a good contact hitter, doesn't strike out a lot. He is, for his age, his knowledge of the strike zone is very impressive. And with more work, I could see him being a very good shortstop in the major league level. He projects to be defensively as a shortstop because his arm is amazing, according to a lot of the scouts that have seen him play. Has excellent speed for his age, already knows how to read pitches and to, get that good lead. Had 34 stolen bases in Port St. Lucie. So we'll see. Once he gets promoted to the high A level and goes to Brooklyn, I'll be very excited to see him play. I think he's one of those young projects that has a lot of upside. And he's viewed as a long-term project. That's what a lot of scouts have said. So again, this could be one of those trades that we look back on years from now and go, wow, we got this guy in that trade years ago for Tommy Pham. Or he can just be a guy that, goes through the Mets system and we never get to see him play. But with his ability at 18 to be able to read the strike zone, he just, I think, needs to maybe fill out a little bit and get a little bit bigger, maybe get a little bit more reps playing every day. I know Port St. Lucie doesn't have a long baseball schedule, so, we'll see. I mean, I think it would be pretty cool to see all these young guys in Brooklyn pretty soon. So, again, those are my infielders that I wanted to talk about. I do have a couple of pitchers I wanted to talk about, but, again, before I do that, I just want to tell everybody, if you could hit that like and subscribe if you're enjoying what you're watching lately. I greatly appreciate that. Next on my list is Jonathan Santucci. Now, he is the first prospect that I wanted to talk about from the pitching side because he actually is a guy that David Stearns drafted. So, very excited for him. He skyrocketed up the system last season from high A all the way to double A, finished the year in double A, had a 9-4 record and a 3.06 ERA in 23 starts, had 117 innings pitched, 51 runs given up, 40 were earned, 41 walks, 138 strikeouts. And what's exciting about him is he's a lefty. So I love the lefty pitchers. And everybody knows, if you've listened to some other previous podcasts, I'm a big David Peterson fan. So you can tell how I'm going to be very enthusiastic about Jonathan Santucci, especially because he's an Italian boy like me. So go Jonathan Santucci. He is probably going to be ranked between 10 and 15. They're projecting on the Mets website once they update the new list for the prospects. He does feature a mid-90s fastball that tops out at 97, a plus slider that has swing and miss stuff, and during the year he developed a changeup, which actually changed his whole season, as he did struggle when he first started in Brooklyn. And then once he discovered that changeup, it changed his whole season. So really, really great that he was able to figure something out and get all the way to double A. And I think, that should speak volumes to the type of worker that he is, especially since he was drafted out of college. I believe he attended Duke University, if I'm not mistaken. So scouts consider him a high potential arm with a upside to be a mid rotation starter. So probably like a number 3 starter is his ceiling. But, that's actually pretty good because you don't have to be an ace every single prospect. You do need to fill out your rotation with guys 2, 3, 4. So, in my opinion, if that's his ceiling, that's really encouraging. And, that means his floor is probably a back end starter. But if he could go through the system, like I think that he will, he could be a very exciting arm in a year or two. With pitchers, I would say probably give him 2 just to play it safe. But you never know. These guys come out of nowhere. You saw Christian Scott couple of years ago come out of nowhere. I could definitely see Santucci doing the same thing. We also saw Nolan McLean come out of nowhere. So you never know with prospects. Sometimes they hit, sometimes they miss. But very excited to watch what Jonathan Santucci does at the start of 2026. The next gentleman on my list is, now this guy I'm very excited about because he is a really tall lefty. And this gentleman's name is Zach Thornton. He is also in Binghamton AA. Have a lot of AA prospects on this list, by the way. He had a 6-2 record between high A and AA. Had an incredible 1.98 ERA in 14 starts. In 72 and 2/3 innings, gave up 21 runs, 16 which were earned, 11 walks, 78 strikeouts, and he was the 2025 standout player in the Mets farm system. An oblique injury did end his season early, so that's why he only had 14 starts and only pitched 72 innings. But this kid's stuff was incredible. Looking him up throughout the year and watching him rise through the ranks of the Mets farm system, going up from the 20 to 25 range all the way up to the mid-teens was really, really impressive to see him skyrocket through the Mets farm system and catch my eye like he did. He has excellent command and control. So this is a guy that is not going to walk a lot of hitters. He kind of figured out something and he just took off, and unfortunately that oblique injury did end his season early. But 2026 could be a very big year for Zach Thornton. He has a low 90s fastball. His slider is his best pitch, scouts are saying. He does have a curveball and a changeup. His best quality is he has a very deceptive delivery. So he doesn't throw necessarily hard, but like I said, with his great command and control of all his pitches, he doesn't need to throw really hard, which is really encouraging because in this age of baseball, it's all about velocity and all about trying to strike guys out with 99-mile-per-hour fastballs. It's really nice to see a pitcher that doesn't have to do that in the Met system. His strong numbers in AA suggest that a promotion to AAA could be around the corner, and I'm very excited to see Zach Thornton. He could be just another one of these pitchers that are going through the Mets farm system, and it's very amazing and it's very exciting to see all these great arms coming up through the Mets farm system, like Santucci, who I spoke about earlier, like Zach Thornton, and now this last guy that I'm going to talk about, my last prospect on this list, is Dylan Ross. Now, Dylan Ross kind of came out of nowhere too. I know I keep saying that, but it's true with these prospects. Sometimes these prospects just come out of nowhere. I actually looked him up last night before coming on here. He apparently was a really good reliever in the Mets system that just kind of flew under the radar, kind of. He started off in high A in Brooklyn, went through AA and AAA, had a record of 2-0 with an ERA of 2.17 in 49 appearances out of the bullpen in 54 innings, had 19 runs given up, 13 of which were earned, 33 walks, 80 strikeouts. He did, if anybody remembers, in game 162 of the Mets regular season, got promoted on the last day of the season, but he did not play. And that was very disappointing because when I saw that they were promoting a kid to pitch in the last game of the year, I thought, if this is going to be the bullpen game that it was, as everybody knows, we would have saw Dylan Ross come in. But unfortunately, the Mets didn't go that way. And we're going to have to wait until 2026 to see Dylan Ross. I may actually bring up Dylan Ross in my next segment because we're going to talk about the Mets roster. But he did struggle, and maybe because he wasn't known well was because he had Tommy John back in 2022 and 2023 after he was drafted. So, he really only got to pitch in 2025. So, this is a guy that in 1 year went through the whole farm system and made it to the majors in the last 80 years. So if you can't get excited about that, I don't know what you can get excited about. But he does feature a high 90s fastball, maxes out around 96 through 99 miles an hour. It did top out at one point at 102. Don't know if that was one of those fastballs that had no control or if it was right over the middle. Have no idea, but it did top at 102. That's impressive. He does have a splitter, a cutter, a slider, and a curve. So he's a Swiss Army knife with his repertoire as a pitcher. So that's pretty exciting to see. He has excellent strikeout ability according to scouts, but he does have command issues. So that's the one thing that he would have to work on before getting a chance at the major leagues. Hopefully that doesn't take too long. I could actually see him at a spring training making it on the Mets, but scouts do consider him to be a high leverage reliever. And because of his elite velocity and his elite strikeout rate, they can view him as a late inning reliever. So that's something that the Mets definitely would need coming into 2026. That is exciting stuff. And like I said, if Met fans aren't excited about this farm system, then I don't know what to tell Met fans, because you have to be optimistic about the Mets farm system. They're ranked number 1. I just gave you 8 examples of why they're ranked number 1 in Major League Baseball. I think some of these guys could get traded at the deadline or maybe down the line next season. Some of these guys may make the roster. The sky is the limit if the Mets play their cards right, if they get back on track, like I said, for 2026, if they win games. As long as the farm system keeps producing, it gives David Stearns a ton of cards to play at the trade deadline and a ton of cards to play when he promotes guys and decides who could make this team better. So I'm very excited about this farm system coming into 2026. But yeah, let's just hope that some of these guys continue to play well. Let's hope that they make us proud as Met fans. If you guys live in any of these areas in Binghamton or in Brooklyn, go down and see these guys play. Support every single one of them, because they're busting their butts to get up here to help us be a great team. So let's go to the farm system and let's go Mets for that reason. Segment 2 is now the roster for opening day. I wanted to talk about the roster for opening day for the reason that I kind of had to put it on, paper to actually look at what the definite roster spots were going to be. Because when you look online and you go to active roster, there's a ton of players there, right? And I know guys are going to now get on me about, but you can see it online. It's there, the active roster. It just shows you the progression of all the guys. It's a complete mess right now because you have the 40-man roster. You have the invitees that are on that list. So I just wanted to break it down a little bit to kind of get a sense of where the Mets are at after they made all their moves. Fair enough. So as I calculate things, you could make the argument that the Met lineup is pretty much set. Okay? I know you're going to say, but they don't have a left fielder. Hear me out for a second. The lineup should be Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, Bo Bichette, Jorge Polanco playing either first base or DH, with Vientos playing whatever position Polanco doesn't play. If he's the DH, then Vientos plays first. If he's the first baseman, then Vientos DHs. Batting sixth, you'll have Brett Beatty playing left field. And I know everybody keeps telling me, oh, but he's not a left fielder. If you look back at his baseball reference, you'll notice, and I remember seeing this online, some great highlights of him playing left field, because that was when Vientos, back in 2024, took his job. And Beatty had to go back down to the minors and figure stuff out. And he had to be in left field. And he did pretty damn well in left field, believe it or not. So I think that's the Mets' plan, to go into 2026 as Brett Beatty as the left fielder. There is a cool highlight online, if you want to look it up, that Brett Beatty, with that strong arm at third, was able to throw a guy out, fielding a ball in left field. So that was pretty impressive. And you got to remember, these guys are athletes. So I'm not really concerned about Brett Beatty not being able to play left field. I think he's going to do fine in left field if that's the Mets' plan. But now let's continue with the lineup. So batting seventh, I see Luis Robert playing center and batting seventh. And then you have Alvarez catching, and you have Marcus Semien playing second base, batting ninth. I think that makes the most sense now that everybody else has been acquired through free agency and trade this past couple of weeks. Then you have the bench, and this is where the Mets need to do some work, and I'm going to get into that in my last segment when I talk about some trades and some free agent signings. But the bench right now is thin, because you only have Luis Torrens and Tyrone Taylor, and then not much else. And I know fans are going to say, oh, but what about some of these other guys that they have? I'll get into that, but the pitching looks kind of set, unless they decide to make some other moves. So right now, with the trade for Freddie Peralta, the starting rotation looks like this. We have Freddie Peralta, Nolan McLean, David Peterson, Clay Holmes, Sean Manaea, and Kodai Senga. That's 6 spots right there. Now, you can only have 13 pitchers if you're going to have 13 position players, like I just read off before. And the bullpen seems pretty stacked right now, with Devin Williams, Luke Weaver, Brooks Raley, Tobias Myers. I actually think Hescar Brazaban's going to start the year with the team. And then you have Luis Garcia, who they acquired, who signed a major league contract. That's 6 spots in the bullpen. Now, if AJ Minter was healthy, there's your bullpen. That's it. But AJ Minter is hurt. So as of right now, as I just pointed out, the Mets have 3 spots, 3, to still fill. Now, can they fill that? Absolutely. Who are they going to fill it with? I have no idea. Now, you could argue, it could be guys like Ryan Mauricio. It could be this other guy that they got for cash from Minnesota, this guy Bajan. Could be Darren Young. Could be Carson Bench. Those are the 4 position players that I think have a chance to fill out the rest of the bench, if they don't sign or make another trade before the start of the season. Right now, the only weakness that the Mets have is the bench. So I really think they need to fix that. They have plenty of time to do that. I don't know if they're going to do that during spring training and kind of have an open competition. I don't know if they're going to make another signing before the season starts. Who knows? There's plenty of names still out there. It's kind of crazy. But on the pitching side of things, you have Dylan Ross, who can make the team, the guy that I just spoke about, one of the prospects. You can have this guy, Joey Gerber. Gerber baby, we'll call him. Make the team. I hope he doesn't, because that's not the type of quality of pitcher I want in the bullpen when you see the stacked bullpen that we have right now. Jonah Tong, who's probably going to start the year in AAA. I don't want him in the bullpen. I think he's going to be a starter. So I'd rather him just stay in AAA and kind of get polished. And then, that's about it. I don't really see any other guys that are standing out saying, oh, yeah, that's the guy. But like I said, once AJ Minter comes back, you're going to have 7 quality guys in the bullpen. So there's not a lot of wiggle room for the Mets as far as the pitching goes. I think they really solidified themselves once they made that trade for Freddie Peralta and Tobias Myers, who, by the way, I want to just say something about Tobias Myers because a lot of people online aren't giving him enough love. It's all about, we got Freddie Peralta. Tobias Myers is going to turn heads. I remember him shutting down the Mets in the playoffs in 2024 as a rookie during his rookie season, and it was really impressive. I think the Mets stole that trade, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. The last segment, and this is going to be a fun one, we have some free agent signings and trades that I thought I could discuss. Now, like I said, the Mets bench is a little thin, but I had a couple of interesting names that I thought I could discuss today to end my show. A guy that I think the Mets could get on the cheap and could be really valuable to this team is Ty France. He's a first baseman free agent. I think he would be a great fit for this team. He's a Gold Glove first baseman. Okay, he solves their defensive problem at first base because right now you have a lot of guys that are going to be playing first base that don't have a lot of experience playing first base. So why not get a first baseman? Right? That makes sense. So Ty France, I think, would be a perfect fit for this team. He brings, if nothing else, experience and veteran leadership to this locker room. He brings stability, which is extremely important at first base. And, I could discuss this. I want you guys to comment on this. I think he'd be a great fit because I think this team has enough offense. You just need to get a guy that could field the ball at first base. And everybody was always saying, oh, you got Bo Bichette at third, you got Lindor at short, you got Marcus Semien at second. But who the hell they're going to throw the ball to at first base? Well, there you go. Ty France. Sounds like a pretty good option to me. But let's see if the Mets do that. I don't know if they will, but I kind of like that. Another guy I thought would be a good fit is another first baseman, Nathaniel Lowe. Now, Nathaniel Lowe was another Gold Glove first baseman. Think he played on the Nationals last year, if I'm not mistaken, for part of the season. He could definitely help the Mets because he's another Gold Glove first baseman. Consistently good on defense. And again, veteran presence to teach some of the younger guys how to play first base. I think he'd be a perfect bench piece to teach some of these young guys how to play first. And he's a low risk, high reward signing. Same thing with Ty France. They would both be low risk, cheap, not too expensive. You don't have to worry about locking them up to long-term deals. So a perfect fit for David Stern's philosophy of not giving out big contracts. Either one of these guys could be a great fit for the Mets defensively at first base and would only cost them 1 year. Probably not even $10 million for either one of these guys. And, to me, either one of these guys should be a no-brainer. But, we'll see what they do. Maybe they believe heavily in Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos and Jorge Polanco to figure it out. But I'm not too thrilled about that idea. I'd rather have one of these other two guys. Another guy, if they don't want to get a first baseman, they can get a power bat by the name of Miguel Andujar. Maybe bring him back to New York. I know Yankee fans remember him. He kills left-handed pitching, and I love that. We need another right-handed bat in the lineup. And he did hit .318 with a 822 OPS last season for the Cincinnati Reds. And watching him with the Reds, every single time I watched the Red game, because they were in a race with the Mets, I honestly wanted Miguel Andujar to be a Met last year because he was just killing it. And I think he brings enthusiasm. I think he is a great guy in the clubhouse. I saw how he reacted with the guys in Cincinnati. They loved him over there. I think he would fit in with this clubhouse with guys like Lindor and Polanco and Soto. I think he'd be a great guy to come off the bench and be a good pinch hitter. He could play a multitude of positions. He played left field, third, play a little bit of first if he had to, maybe. But again, another bat that I think the Mets could use, and another 1-year type of contract. Nothing too lucrative, cheap, low risk, 1-year deal, a really good fit for the bench, I think, if the Mets wanted a veteran right-hander off the bench. Speaking of right-handed veterans coming off the bench, and I know this might not be favorable to a lot of Met fans, maybe it will be. I loved him as a Met. Starling Marte. Starling Marte is still available, and he was a good Met. And I started a thing on my group chat, shout out to a couple of my buddies, of Marte Parte every single time he got a huge hit. I would love to say that again. I'm a little disappointed the Mets didn't re-sign him yet with all these uncertainties with the Met bench, but he brings veteran leadership, he brings experience, he brings speed coming off the bench, he brings good clubhouse vibes. Just ask Juan Soto how important Starling Marte is to him. I'm not saying you need to bring him back on a long-term deal. Obviously, he's 37 years old, doesn't have a lot of time left. Why not have him as a bat off the bench, veteran presence? God forbid something happens to somebody, he can play the outfield. He could DH. He can get some playing time. If nothing else, he's another really good right-handed bat that I think the Mets could use. So I'm very excited to see if any of these guys could sign with the New York Mets. Probably won't happen because I think, like I said, the Mets lineup looks pretty set. Other than a couple of bench pieces, I don't know if the Mets want to put money into the bench. That might be an area where David Stearns might want to get creative, but we'll see. Last couple of guys on this free agent list are pitchers. And I know Met fans are excited about Freddie Peralta, but I honestly think the Mets need one more guy. And if they're going to get one more guy, I would like it to be one of these two guys. So the first guy I'm going to talk about is Zach Gallen. He's a workhorse. He has that bulldog mentality on the mound that I love. And he also pitched 192 innings last season. No Met came close to that last season. He pitched 33 starts, and he did have a down year, but even in a down year, he finished strong, and I think has plus stuff, has durability. He's a buy low, bounce back candidate that, could use a change of scenery. He would be coming closer to home. I believe he's a Jersey native or a Philly native. I think he's a Jersey native. Has great command and would help a lot of these young starters. And that's what the Mets need. They need another veteran in there that's a frontline starter that could really help these young guys like Nolan McLean. And I think having a guy like Gallen would be fantastic. Him and Peralta would be a great 1-2 punch. That's another sell point. And it would allow Nolan McLean to blossom and to grow in that third spot in the rotation. Has that for a 1-2-3. Having Peralta, Gallen, and McLean. Might cost the Mets some money, but again, as this offseason is coming to a close and we're getting closer to pitchers and catchers coming, you can probably get Gallen on one of those 2 to 3 year deals with opt outs. Something kind of like what Bo Bichette signed with the Mets. It's all about getting the players for now. So I would love Zach Gallen. I think if he doesn't go to Baltimore, he's probably going to end up on the Mets. Another guy that the Mets could probably land on a high AAV contract with opt outs, and a guy who they've been linked to all offseason is Framber Valdez. And, this is a top of the rotation guy. He's a established starter, has a record of 81-52 lifetime. So he's a winner. Has a lifetime ERA of 3.36. Is a World Series champion and a premier left-handed pitcher. He would put the Mets pitching staff over the top and give you a solid 1-2 punch with him and Peralta. And then you add in Nolan McLean, you add in Clay Holmes, and now you're talking. Now you got some depth in your rotation, guys that you could rely on to go deeper into games at the top of your rotation. I think it's extremely important for the Mets to get one of these two guys. My preference, I would personally like Framber Valdez because he's a World Series winner. He was on that Houston team that dominated, so the pressure ain't a thing with him. My only worry with Valdez, though, is that he crossed up his catcher. That's probably why nobody's signing him right now, which I think, that's debatable. That's 50-50. I think it's a little silly. I am still worried about it, though. But again, I don't think that it's going to be a problem going forward. I think he knows he messed up. So it would be a good redemption story at the very least. And why not be a Met? Nobody else is going for you. I definitely don't want the Phillies to swoop in or somebody like that to get Framber Valdez. The Phillies worry me about Valdez because, remember, the Phillies lost out on bringing back Ranger Suarez. So the Phillies are looking for a starter. So let's block the Phillies again, David Stearns. We blocked them from getting Bo Bichette. Let's block them from getting Framber Valdez. You heard it here on the Optimistic Met Fan Podcast. But before I leave, I wanted to talk about one trade that I would really love the Mets to do, and that's to solidify left field and get the Gold Glove left fielder, Stephen Kwan. Now, there's some rumblings online, some other podcasters, I'm not going to mention their names, that had my idea too of getting Stephen Kwan. I mentioned that on the Diamond Geezers podcast last week when I was a guest star. Again, check those guys out. They're awesome. Shout out to them. But he's a premier table setter. And I think Stephen Kwan would make this lineup one of the better lineups in baseball. It would definitely then look like a lineup that can compete with the Dodgers. God forbid I say that. But, he has great contact skills. He's an on-base machine. He does everything that you want a table setter to do. He has Gold Glove defense in left field. He would bring that to the Mets. And that's extremely important because that's all David Stearns talked about was defense, right? So by bringing in Stephen Kwan, you now have a Gold Glove left fielder. You have Luis Robert, a Gold Glove center fielder. And then you can live with whatever you get out of Juan Soto, who, by the way, said that was his biggest thing this offseason that he was going to work on. And the year before that, he said he wanted to work on his base running skills. And he was almost a 40-40 player last season. So the Mets outfield defense would be elite if we got Stephen Kwan. But it's going to be a really hard sell. I don't think the Cleveland Guardians would necessarily give him away. So that's going to be a problem. But I kind of had a hypothetical trade to maybe get the conversation started if the Mets wanted to jump in and try to get him. So in order to get Stephen Kwan, you're going to have to get a little bit uncomfortable, right? You can't just get, nobody prospects for a guy like him. So, knowing Cleveland's history, they like major league ready guys or major league talent and almost ready prospects, right? So, I had this couple of hypothetical trades for you. First one is Stephen Kwan for David Peterson and Brett Beatty. And you could add in maybe a lower level prospect like Boston Barrow to maybe get the deal done. I don't know if that's too much or too little. It's uncomfortable to say that because I love Brett Beatty and I love David Peterson, but with the way the Mets roster is constructed, they're kind of expendable. I think that's the proper word to use, expendable. So I would definitely trade those two guys to get Stephen Kwan. And then you throw in a prospect like Boston Barrow just to sweeten up the deal, to kind of get the deal done. I don't know if Cleveland would want those guys. But the next one would be Stephen Kwan for David Peterson and Mauricio and AJ Ewing. Now that one I don't like, but like I said, you have to get uncomfortable sometimes when you make these trade proposals. So I think AJ Ewing is the kind of prospect that could excite the Cleveland Indians, but Ryan Mauricio is the other one that I think would move the needle a little bit. But you do have to throw in some major league ready guys or at least some major league talent. So David Peterson would be a guy, again, because he has 1 year left on his contract until he has to be re-signed again. I think he could be a guy that could be on the trade block. So I know the Mets entertain that during the offseason, so that's why I brought it up. It's at least a good debate to have, because I think the Mets could do one last big thing before the season starts, and that would definitely move the needle and get people excited for not only spring training but for opening day. So with that said, that is the end of my episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe to the podcast as we're slowly growing, so it's getting very exciting. Until next week, like I always say, let's go Mets and stay amazing. I'll see you guys next week.